Welcome back. I'm Maria Ressa in the studio. Joining me here are three people, two of Rapplers, Rambo Talabang, who's had gotten, actually both of you have gotten very little sleep, Sofia Tomacruz, Bingbong Crisologo, Manila Tondo, and Ateneo's from the University of Ateneo, Ateneo University, Arjun Aguirre, who has run political campaigns, successful ones in the past, and I'd love to hear more from him. Let's start. Arjun, you first, please. When you look at the way these campaigns have been run, what stands out for you?
Well, when it comes to campaigns, you have to recognize the usual pattern or structure that campaign handlers love to do. So they have to mount, a campaign at the early part of the campaign season, usually the pre-campaign season. So usually they produce campaign ads that time just to introduce a candidate. And to me, one of the successful, campaigns that I have seen during that time, pre-campaign season, was that of Mar Rojas as a campaign. So if you remember in his campaign ad, he introduced himself as an economista. And he didn't appear in that ad. So he just introduced himself as an economista, and a person revealed this name of Mar Rojas in a usual discussion in a barbershop. So to me, that is one of one of the effective ways of introducing a candidate. And I think it really affected Mar Rojas's, surveys, performance in the first part. That's why in the early part of the campaign season, his numbers went up. In fact, he reached up to sixth place, Pulse Asia. But again, when people started to produce their own campaign ads, of course, things change. Bato's campaign ad to me is also successful in the sense that it really sent that message to the people that I was an effective, police officer during the time of then Mayor Duterte, and I'm also an effective chief of the Philippine National Police, delivering the goods for the first 2 years, and the ad itself captured that that messaging. So for the other candidates, their campaign ads appeared at the latter part. That's why when people when various candidates started to bombard our televisions with campaign ads, they were not that given much attention by the people. In fact, I want to highlight the campaign ad of Senator Bam Aquino, especially for the latter part. So in his ad, he highlighted his accomplishments. Perhaps his intention there was to debunk some of the attacks from the president that he did not do something while in the Senate. So that's what I have noticed in the past 3 months of the campaign.
I'm going to go back to you. One of the things that stands out, of course, is if you look with me on ph.rappler.com, you can see these are the 15 clustered precincts, the first to transmit the 2019 election results. But here's what's different, and this is the fourth automated elections that we've covered. It's been at a standstill for more than an hour. It's almost 9 p.m. It's 10 minutes to 9, and the polls closed at 6 p.m. By 9 p.m., we had a significant chunk of the votes in during the 2016 and the 2013 elections. So something is going wrong. We are going to come back to you. We're going to go to the transparency server at Pope Pius, and our head of research, Gemma Mendoza, will be speaking with us later on. But keep refreshing, we will hope. But we want to find out exactly why this is at a standstill. This server is run by the Commission on Elections. So far, what we've had today is that the failure of the VCMs, James Jimenez, the spokesman of the Commission on Elections, said that 400 to 600 VCMs are being down. That's roughly 3 times what it was in the past, correct? So let's go, Rambo, please. Bingbong Crisologo, he was arrested. Again, in recent years, this is the first time a candidate himself has been arrested, allegedly for vote buying. Can you tell us what's happened?
Okay, so Bingbong Crisologo is running under the ruling party, PDP Laban, the party of the president, in fact. Last night, there was a police operation in Barangay Bahay Toro in Quezon City. And according to the police, there were around 40 people who were collecting money and giving money in favor of the candidacy of Bingbong Crisologo. So police had sent an 8-man team, intelligence operations team. They were wearing civilian attire, so they penetrated the area, they claimed, and when the time came when they saw people supposedly exchanging money, they cried out that they were cops. But it was such a big venue and that there were so many people that they couldn't contain the people there. So people started scrambling around. But still, the people remained inside the house in Bahay Toro in Quezon City. And they called for Bingbong Crisologo. Crisologo went there and he had a confrontation with the cops. He said that the cops shouldn't leave the house because they were not there with the proper warrant. They weren't wearing police overalls. So, according to cops, Crisologo detained them. And with that,
Crisologo detained them.
yeah, that's the allegation of cops.
Right.
So that's where the obstruction of
Obstruction of
justice,
justice. Yeah.
charge came in. He was detained overnight, a day before elections. We were really surprised about this. And he stayed there during the first few hours of election day. So he had the fear of not actually being able to vote. But eventually he was able to vote and he was released pending further investigation. And eventually, we saw in the charge sheet, the resolution of the prosecutor, the police actually accused him of vote buying as well.
Did they have evidence of vote buying?
That's what's amazing and sensational about this case. They arrested 40 people in that area, but they only collected 800 pesos. When the police announced 800 pesos, we asked, is that 800,000 pesos? No, they said, it's just 800 pesos. Literally 8 pieces of 100 peso bills. So that's the evidence that the cops have, and that's what they're questioning now. How could they do vote buying when the amount of money is just 800? It's not proportional, and it's not enough to offer for a person to actually vote for a mayoral candidate.
And what do you make of this?
On one side, we want to, of course, we want to see both sides. For Crisologo, it makes sense that cops detained him because he was detaining operatives. He was not cooperating. According to policemen, he also tried to call the bosses because he's a congressman. Even before running for mayor, he's a member of the House and he has connections and he's part of the ruling party, PDP Laban. So he called a lot of generals. He used that card for the policemen and allegedly intimidated the people there, the cops there, so that he wouldn't be arrested. But for police, it's really just them doing their job and they want to complete what they really want to do before the elections, which is to raise the numbers and show that they're doing something.
Raise the numbers. I mean, numbers always get me in
Yes,
trouble.
the numbers of accomplishments. So, for example, also the liquor ban, they want to intensify operations to actually send a message that the public can't get away with the ban of the government. And it's the same thing for vote buying. For them, this is just another case of vote buying, and it just so happened that a politician was in the scene and they have no choice but to arrest him because he allegedly obstructed justice.
Yeah, but some of these things, though, are ridiculous. Like if it's
Yes.
800 pesos for 40 people.
Yes, that's
if
the
you
crazy
even-
thing about it.
Right.
Too.
So I guess, the same way that the lists and numbers
Yes.
get us all in trouble,
Mhm.
what's the reaction from the police? Why? Actually, earlier, NCRPO chief was
Guillermo,
here.
yes, yeah.
And he had said that this was, at most, they would do an obstruction of justice. What changed?
We actually also don't know for the police. We kept asking them, why is it that you wanted to file vote buying as well? According to them, they just wanted to take their chance in the prosecution. So because it's the prosecution level, the prosecutor can see or decide for himself or herself that there's a possibility there could be probable cause to file a case against them and continue investigation. Crisolog is saying that this is politically motivated because there are also a lot of cases where vote buying is happening all over Quezon City, the most populous city in the Philippines.
Right.
And we heard it from the president himself. He said that vote buying is integral in the Philippines to actually complete an election.
Right.
And Eleazar, I remember earlier General Eleazar saying that they know that there are so many vote buying cases, but they have to focus in certain areas. That's where the next question should come in. How do they distribute their cops? And that's the
Right.
question for Crisologo. Why is it that the police operated on his people?
Right, right. I just pulled up the preliminary results that are coming in from Quezon City, and you can see that Vincent Crisologo has, of these early results, 28.54% of the votes, and Joy Belmonte, who he's running against, has 66.42% of the votes. The other thing that happened last night was Emil Marañon in Navotas, and this time it's the National Bureau of Investigation that had come in and arrested folks without a search warrant, and there was a woman who was ultimately released, right? Is this a quota? I mean, I asked General Alyasar before he
Earlier.
went on the set, and he didn't know because this is the National Bureau of Investigation. But both Gigi Go, our senior editor, and Lente all pointed out that the use of the law enforcement to intimidate or harass is a very subtle point now to influence the elections. Are you? Your reaction to this?
First things first is the quota.
Yes.
Definitely, there's an eagerness for cops to raise the numbers because it's their achievement. That's how they are able to secure funds. That's how they're able to get credibility from the public by saying that they have achieved a lot of things. And these achievements, like in the war on drugs, these are questionable. These have implications on human rights.
Right.
These have implications on their standard operating procedure because they want to raise the numbers, they have to intensify. Sometimes they have to compromise due process on their part. And with this, you have that eagerness to actually raise the numbers and mix that with politics because cops are really political because they depend so much in local governments. When you mix those two things, you have a police that wants to raise the numbers, and in many cases, they want to raise the numbers for a particular side.
I'm going to go back to you, Rambo. That's really interesting. I'm going back to our results page, and I'm going to refresh it one more time, ph.rappler.com. You can take a look. We're looking at the very same numbers that we've had for over an hour now. Joining us on the line is our head of research, Gemma Mendoza. She is at the Pope Pius, in touch, I hope, touching the transparency server. Gemma, what is happening? Do we have Gemma? Guys? No. Okay, sorry, we just lost the line. I'm dying to find out what's happening. Let's go to Sophia. Sophia, you were my first at 5 in the morning. I think we started talking, and you're back here. You look refreshed still. What's your day been like? What's been the most important events that have happened?
Right. Well, kind of just jumping off from the discussion that you and Rambo were having. I mean, besides the voting malfunctions the machine malfunctions that we saw throughout the voting period, just looking back at some of our stories now, when it came to outlining and trying to list down the kind of glitches that we wanted to avoid on this election day, it came to light that the voting malfunctions, the machine malfunctions weren't necessarily in the top of the list. So top of mind were the possibility of defective SD cards, pens blotting, and possibly, compromising the way that these vote counting machines would read ballots. And at the same time, the fact that the certification of the election system was nearly 3 months late. But then on voting day
Yes.
itself, we saw that what really came to light were these vote counting machines again, which supposedly were, you know, there was supposed to be no issue with it. And actually, when we spoke to James, Comelec spokesperson James Jimenez in the morning, early morning, perhaps around before 10 a.m. even, that wasn't even the major problem at the time. He pointed out that the major problem was overcrowding.
Yeah.
And overcrowding was happening because of another machine, the Comelec's new fingerprint verification machines, which also malfunctioned, but I mean, it wasn't as crucial as a vote counting machine. And so those were some of the things that we were seeing. And just hopping from one precinct to another, we saw that voters were really getting impatient. But I mean, at the end of the day, what could you do? We saw up to the very last minute that teachers were still transporting backup voting machines from one precinct to another, kilometers away, and everything.
Fantastic. I'm told we have Gemma Mendoza back from the Pope Pius server, the transparency server. Gemma, tell us, why are we at a standstill in the vote count?
Hello, Maria.
Yes.
Do you hear me? So basically, what happened was that they basically what happened was that they gave us they released one result file, which had roughly like over 300 receipts. And then after that, there's a long lag. We've been waiting for the machine to send us a new batch of results file, but it basically stopped sending results files. And now we're looking at their tracking system. It's called the consolidated canvassing system, and we're able to actually see like how many precincts has already been received by the Comelec central server. So if you understand the Philippine election system, there are three servers. So one is the transparency server, the other one is the Comelec central server, and then you have those servers in the polling in the cities and in the canvassing center. So what we are seeing is, like for instance, we know that as of 8:45 p.m., the central server has already received like over 92% of all precincts from Metro Manila, from NCR. Like for Region 1, for instance, it's 82.27% already. And we're seeing updates of this in the viewing in the projected in the transparency server room, but none of these results are consolidated. They are summarized because Comelec is not supposed to be summarizing. Hello?
Yeah. So what does that mean? Why is it not going into the transparency server, which is where all the media groups are connected?
So the media groups and the watchdog groups and the political parties, Maria, we don't know. They haven't given us any explanation yet. In fact, right now I just came here upstairs so that I can talk to you. But I'm gonna go back downstairs because we're asking them for an explanation precisely on why no updates are being released from the server.
And it's really interesting that that's happened that way, because you already have 300, at least 329, the 15 clustered precincts.
From the first batch. So the first batch was roughly like came in at around 6:05 p.m. And that consisted of roughly over 300 precincts, clustered precincts from all over the country. And then we were waiting for the second batch because we were expecting that every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on the size of the file, we'll be getting a new file to be uploaded. But so far, no new file yet since that first file that we received.
Oh, okay. Can you please keep us updated? How do we get a chance to see what the results are if 92% of NCR is already out?
Yeah, so here's the thing. The Congress Central Server actually publishes ER, election returns from each precinct. But because of the law, the COMELEC is not supposed to be summarizing that. They're just supposed to be canvassing uh, uh, through the official canvas, and that's happening much later. So this one. For the results that are coming directly from the precincts, what they're doing is they're just basically publishing everything in the central server. So you can access it, but we don't know who won. That's the funny thing. So the box, halos tapos na yung boxing, pero hindi natin alam kung sino nanalo.
Incredible. Okay, we'll wait to hear from you. Please let us know and who is accountable. Thanks, Gemma, from the Pope Pius Transparency Server. Arjun,
Yes.
your reaction to this. This is a first in the four different automated elections that we've had.
Well, I'm honestly shocked or surprised. I really did not expect that this will happen.
Yes.
Usually, when the results are starting to come in, at this time, people are starting to see the pattern, okay,
Right.
the voting pattern, who's winning, who's not. In fact, in the last 2016 elections, at 9 p.m., as far as I can remember, we're already seeing
Correct.
Duterte
Correct.
winning the elections, and of course, for the senatorial elections, we're already seeing the top 11 or top 10.
Yes.
So I'm really bothered with this news that some of our VCMs are not functioning well or have malfunctioned, and with this news that tells us that that the results are not yet coming in. To me, this might affect the perception of the people as regards the outcome of this election, especially in the coming hours.
Yes.
When things started to move again. Tomorrow, I'm sure people would ask the same question: what happened last night?
Yes. Yes. I'm asking those questions right now, right? I mean, we all are. Rambo, I think that you may have to.
Yes.
You may have to leave. Can you
Uh-huh.
give us just your last thoughts on Crisologo? Actually, it was very interesting what you said about quotas and the police actions.
I guess for Crisologo, the lesson to be learned in this case is for politicians, when faced in these cases, it's better to keep a cool head when facing the police, because the police, more than ever in this administration, are emboldened because you have the president who backs them all the time. From day one, the president has been saying that he has their back. Whatever they do, the president will be there in drug operations, in speaking with politicians. And for police, as generals have already said before, they should always follow the rule of law.
Right.
How they can do that, we're not sure, because it's also them who watch each other.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
so
you so
much,
much.
Rambo. Sophia, let's finish with how you jumped off of what Rambo said in
Right.
terms of quotas.
Yeah, I think it's interesting talking about quotas, because the thing about vote buying is it's not necessarily isolated to just the period a few days before elections. And during the entire election period, vote buying is common. And what I'm picking up from the whole Crisologo incident is that, and from Rambo's narration of the events, is that even the police themselves aren't 100% familiar with what the vote buying law is all about. Because, we're talking about amounts. 800 pesos doesn't seem like a lot, but then we go back to what the vote buying law says, and it's literally any value, any amount of any value.
Right.
And so right there, that's where all the criticism comes in and says, it's not realistic and everything. But at the same time, when we talk about quotas, it's interesting to note that it's only coming, well, to a certain extent, it's understandable because, it's the days leading up to the election. But then, what about all the days before that and the days that come after? I mean, do we see the same sense of urgency when it comes to vote buying? And at least for, what we can say about the days that came before, the months that came before, it definitely wasn't, as big of a numbers race as it is now.
Even to make it a numbers race is very interesting to me. Arjun, your reaction to the way quotas say for this and how it could both our senior editor Gigi Go and Lenta actually came out with statements of how this, in her words, weaponizes the law enforcement can come in and influence a local race by arresting without a warrant for one.
Actually, this is not something new in Philippine politics. As far as I can remember, in the 1980s, 90s, especially if the position is hotly contested, the usual reaction of an incumbent or a sitting politician is to mobilize the resources that he or she has. And one of these, resources, of course, the police force. So what usually happens there is, of course, they may, look for a crime or a case. They may file a case to their competitors or rivals. So this is not something new. Now, what makes this case of Bingbong Crisologo special or unique is the fact that this was done on the eve of the elections.
Correct.
And again, I think this was not highlighted earlier. The claim of Bingbong Crisologo was that this arrest was politically motivated. It was deployed by the vice mayor, who happens to run, of course, for mayor, Joy Belmonte. So this is part of an ongoing operations, both parties. From Bingbong and of course from his rivals. So I think they're also using this event to get the sympathy of the people. And who knows, later when the results start to come in, we might see a different outcome in favor of Bingbong.
Can you assess for me the way and I'll just separate it to administration and opposition, the way campaigns were run?
To my understanding, the administration did not really they did not campaign that much for the past 3 months. Their idea of campaign was focused only on sorties, organizing, public gatherings, to meet people, to talk to them. But when it comes to the other aspects of campaigning, like for example, mounting a campaign team of Hugpong ng Pagbabago, PDP Laban, to me, they're not that well coordinated. In fact, I have observed also that some operations of the Hugpong ng Pagbabago were not, in sync with some of the, activities or campaign activities of the PDP Laban. So, to me, they banked on so much on the sorties. They traveled to so many places. In fact, it was Mayor Sara Duterte who organized some of these sorties to target the places that has have a rich population when it comes to this election. Now, for the opposition, as I also noticed that they did not, coordinate the early part of the campaign. They only talk to each other. Perhaps they only, create this new coalitions, informal coalitions, the latter part of the campaign. So I want to highlight the effort of the progressive groups, like the workers, the laborers, to team with Nery Colmenares. Because to me, the opposition is not, just about the moderate center-left opposition.
Right.
So I want to highlight also that the radical left and of course the labor left, so they also mounted their own campaigns. And again, during the early part of the campaign season, they did not coordinate, they did not, coalesce. But at the latter part, when they saw this opportunity to coalesce, like for example, they also tried to, pull in Shell Jokno because of his progressive, image, stance on issues. So that's one of the things that I would like to highlight. Again, for the team themselves, for the coalition itself, the campaign that they mounted was not that strong, but at the latter part they tried to coalesce, they tried to work together, but to me it's kind of late. Okay, it really affected the perception of the people that we have this united administration ticket, and
Yeah.
on the other side we have this fragmented opposition coalitions.
It's also interesting because of what the administration, a very powerful leader, Duterte, President Duterte actually splintered his forces, right? The Hugpong and then the PDP Laban, not really running a full slate in either one. What do you make of this, and how does it, in midterm elections, in past midterm elections, politicians will go to the ruling party anyway. But this one seems to really make a farce out of our political party system.
Yeah, for some people it was a blunder on the part of the government to have these two teams or two coalitions running for these 12 seats in the Senate. But to me, it can also be interpreted as a strategy on the part of the government to pull in more people, admin people, so that the voters won't have that enough choice come election time. So perhaps the results would show that it really affected the perception of the people that the more admin people who are running, the better. So that's my view about this hugpong ng pagbabago in PDP laban.
Sophia, you've been covering the campaigns, elections, all of the issues that have come out of that. I mean, what's interesting about the 2019, about these? What have we learned?
Well, I think the most interesting thing for me would be to see how that translates to voters actually going out and making that choice, right? Because it was a heated campaign. Both sides only had 90 days to court voters, and we saw how packed some meeting the advances were, some campaign sorties were, and all the issues that came to light, right? Discussions on the anti-illegal drug campaign, also increasing prices and everything, and I mean, it was dominated by what candidates were saying, but I mean, tomorrow, and as we already see it, we're actually seeing what voters themselves are saying, and I think it's very interesting to see whether or not we managed to have a high voter turnout and how that looks like, because I mean, if we want answers on where people really are at this point, then I think the results will perfectly reflect that.
Arjun, in terms of political party system, the campaigns, what have we learned about the Filipino voter? I mean, we still have to see the results, but we've certainly seen the surveys.
Well, number one, political parties, they really have to step up in the coming elections, also in the next elections, perhaps in 2022. It's very obvious that when it comes to campaigning, political parties, obviously in the Philippines, are passive actors. They are not in control of the discussions. They are not that proactive when it comes to making an effort to talk to people. They just run a campaign, organizing sorties. In fact, when it comes to the debates, it's the political parties they should to organize the topics, the claims that their candidate would be offering to the people. So now, if this is the case, we have this weak parties. The tendency is that most candidates they opt to use campaign teams. This is an ad hoc group of people who will handle your campaign from day one to the last day. Now the disadvantage of that is that when it comes to the values, the principles, the non-negotiables that should inform your policies, they're usually reduced to sellable sound bites, messaging. So that's the reason why, if you have noticed, most of the campaign ads these days, they're not that deep enough to highlight the real issues of the day. For example, poverty. corruption, EJK. I haven't seen,
Not one.
yeah, a
Except
campaign.
Chell, but not even Chell, right?
Yes.
Issues, they don't seem to be, you were talking about the campaigns, the administration, how it wasn't doing the debates necessarily, right? It was focused on traditional, on the ground entertainment. And they're quite organized. They're very well organized in that sense, right? It looks like a throwback to the 80s in that sense. Is that what you're seeing,
The debates.
or the lack of it, the lack of the focus?
Well, for some people, especially candidates who are not that familiar of the issues, of course, they would avoid, attending a debate or a media appearance. They do not want to reveal themselves as, unfamiliar of the issues of the day. That's why in the past 3 months, you can only highlight some, candidates who are active in attending debates, willing to be grilled by media people. To me, that is also a strategy that we must revisit in the coming, in the next elections. We really have to, convince the candidates that debates or, election debate is really a must, because this is the moment in an electoral exercise wherein you can inform the people of your issues. And of course, debates can also be your means to get information from the people, their reactions. The media, they can be the means by which, the issues can be conveyed to the candidates themselves. But again, the problem with our debates in this country is that they are not that institutionalized. In the 2016 elections, we had that, presidential debates. But unfortunately, for this midterm election, COMELEC did not organize this debate. So, to me, that's one thing that we must, look forward to perhaps in the 2022 elections. The debate should not be limited only to the presidential candidates, but also it should also consider the participation of the senatorial candidates as well as, local politicians.
For the midterm, Arjun, you mentioned earlier values and principles that platforms should be based on. Where did we see this?
Ideally speaking, that's the job of political parties.
Right.
Political parties, again, they are not just, there for campaigns or, running a government. Political parties, to me, they are a coterie of people who believe in a particular view of the world, way of thinking, and part of their job is, to mainstream, popularize their values. They have to translate it. They have to translate these values, these principles, to policies. If they manage to win a seat in the government. In other countries, like in the West, they are very serious on this matter. In fact, when we say political parties, they really have these officers, officials who take care of the running the party, like for example propaganda, information, political education. So all of them, they play an important role, not just in recruiting members, but of course perhaps for the country itself. So whenever a political party sits in a government, the understanding there is the government becomes the very tool of that party in translating their values into policies, into government decisions. So in this country, in our country, unfortunately, we do not have that kind of political party that that can really translate their values, principles, ideologies to policies.
And instead, what we're seeing, what have we learned about the voters now?
To me, the voters, the very manner by which they vote, they kind of reflect what kind of politicians that we also have in this country. So the fact that they are, the fact that most people support popular candidates, the fact that they support strongman candidates, it really shows that they rely on image, on the messaging, so they are not that serious on the other matters of a campaign, like for example, the stand of a candidate, the principle of that candidate. So, to me, this past three elections reveal this pattern among the Filipino voters. They love to see their candidates. They love to identify themselves with their candidates. They must also be familiar of their characteristics, their personalities. But again, when it comes to knowing their values, their platforms, again, we're still trying our best to convince the people about these stuff.
The surveys results that we're looking at, and even as we look at the partial unofficial results that have come in, reflect the surveys so far. It's very small, so we have no idea what it really means, right? But they tend to show us that this is turning into a referendum on the popularity of President Duterte. An administration that has really shifted away from the values that our democracy are supposedly
Institutions. So
and hollowed out our institutions, right? And yet no real opposition challenge came up against this. Why?
well, it's because they cannot counter the Duterte image, the Duterte myth. For the past 2 years or three, most opposition figures, in fact, they only focus on specific issues, especially issues of the day. So this to me is so ineffective, especially if you have a very popular president who managed to unite, people not just from the South but also here in NCR. So again, we're dealing with the myth. We're dealing with this powerful person who cannot really betray the people just like that. In fact, recently we just saw the trust rating of the president. Is still so high.
Quite high.
So to me, the strategy should have been to attack that narrative of Duterte, that myth.
Right.
That people cannot just rely on a strongman president or a strongman politician to get what they want in our country. Institutions, again, we should focus on making institutions work. And so far, as I have been observing in this campaign, only a handful of candidates tried to make use of that institution as their battle cry, as their messaging, as their claim for winning a seat in this election.
The idea there seemed to have been either get President Duterte to raise your hand or veer away from criticizing him. Is this a failure of the opposition?
Yes, because if you have noticed, most of the administration candidates, they don't need to campaign anymore.
Right.
You just have to, tell the people that I was with the president when he was still a mayor. That's the reason why, Bato and Bongo are doing well in the surveys. Now, on the part of the opposition, they should have, redirected the attention of the people. Instead of just attacking or, resorting to negative campaigning, they should have offered, a new narrative, perhaps, or a new vision for this country. Perfect example of that would be Shell Jokno's campaign. He captured the imagination of the young people, especially the youth, because of that, attempt to offer a new vision, a vision that is anchored on the, idea that he's here to change, the structure, the system, addressing the problems in our judicial system by being focused on helping the poor. So, to me, that's one of the things that the opposition coalitions, not just the moderate center-left, but also the other oppositions failed to do. Other opposition figures like Nery Colmenares, the labor, candidates, they focused on their particular issues. For example, for the labor candidates, they focused on, solving the labor problems, promising, to end contractualization. But again, when it comes to capturing the imagination of this, this Filipino nation, they may have targeted the labor sector, but of course we have many sectors in our country to deal with, like the women, the youth, the young professionals. So to me, encountering this strongman, leader, kind of image of Duterte, you must be creative enough to cause this disruption when it comes to the perception of the people that we are not just for the labor, but we are also for you. We are not just for EJK, we are not just for life, but we are also for these aspects. Remember, this is a senatorial elections, and you have 12 candidates there. Forming a coalition would entail being creative in pulling in these claims. This is for women. This is for peace. So that's the job of coming up with a coalition claim. So Ocho Derecho is an attempt to do that approach, but again they faltered in the end because of the negative, too much negative campaignings that they did. People failed to see the beauty of their claims, failed to see the beauty of their platforms.
They failed, or they were attacked, because the attacks are also exponential, and they didn't seem to have enough resources.
Perhaps they failed, and of course the president already saw the possibility that this campaign might change the scenario. But to me, one of the things that the opposition group should have done, again, as I have mentioned earlier, was to unite. I mean, they should have done this at the early stage of the campaign, right after filing their certificates of candidacy. Perhaps they should have produced an ad highlighting that we are united against EJK. We're united.
Well, imagine if Grace and Mar actually came together. Grace
Yeah.
Poe and Mar Rojas, two of the people who didn't come together in the 2016 elections.
Actually, that's one of the things that I'm trying to understand also. The independents, apart from the opposition groups, the independents also should have done their part when it comes to changing this narrative of strongman leadership in our country. If
It
you have
almost
noticed,
felt like they ducked a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to challenge the popularity.
the independents like Binay, Grace Poe, Sergio Osmeña,
Right.
they
Surge.
yeah.
Yeah. He's not even.
So they really tried to discuss issues that are not that antagonistic toward the administration, and of course not that antagonistic toward the opposition. So I think that's also one of the reasons why most of our independents are winning. So they are not that negative toward the administration, and of course they are also, let's say, opposing some of the things that are being highlighted by the opposition.
But I would say the two, right? Grace Poe as independent, she's slipped from being number one to number two, at least in the surveys, right? Who knows where we'll go. If she had taken a stronger position, would it have helped? Maybe not, right? Bam Aquino is, gosh, where is he right now? I mean, again, too preliminary. The results that we have are just too small a fraction to make any distinction. But he also, again, Arjun, you mentioned values. You've actually, of all of our analysts, have mentioned values and principles the most. And that's so interesting, because I feel like part of what we've seen in this is a distortion of Filipino values and principles. It seems like in 2019, we're saying it is okay to kill. We will vote for more. Is that what we're doing?
Unfortunately, some people really don't get this point, that principles, values, they still matter in politics. In fact, in producing a campaign ad, you must always make sure that you will highlight a particular value that would entice a voter to support your candidate. So for example, in the ad of Grace po, tao po, the word tao po, that to me highlights the disposition of Filipinos to be respectful. So in this election, in this electoral cycle, I haven't seen that much of effort or attempt
Yep.
to make use of values principles, or the people they're not that very much concerned with this, and to me it it really bothers me because this is the first time that we're seeing people being disconnected with some of the things that we value most. For example, life, freedom,
Right.
justice.
I wonder whether that means that these values are just skin deep. I'll go back up. Does any values, principles, have you heard this during the campaign at all?
Well, I mean, I remember honestly it was definitely an issue.
With
that
Sara Duterte saying that it
Yes.
isn't an issue,
Yeah,
right?
and then people, having a whole argument about it. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one thing one really big thing that comes to mind, corruption always. But that kind of boils down to honesty as well, I suppose. And, but then, I mean, just going back to what the voters are saying, right? Because we were talking to them all day. I don't know if you would describe it as a value or something, but then, I mean, it's the same word that always goes around in every election, right? Change. I want something new. I want change. If that means a cleaner city, less traffic, better education and everything. And so, I mean, those stand out. And I think if we're talking about values, it's also interesting to bring in, right, quote unquote, the youth voters, because people always talk about how their mock election results are so different from, like nationwide surveys. And I think if you, or at least looking at, discussion, a lot of the values seem to have been focused also. I mean, brought the light in, discussions about the youth and the kind of leaders that they want.
To me, it's more the frustration of the people. It's also one of the things that I would like to highlight when it comes to, where are our values, our principles in our campaigns. Frustration in the sense that, people are becoming so disillusioned whenever, a candidate would present himself or herself as a clean candidate, a principled person. But when that candidate wins, again, the people, they always expect that candidate would change, would lose these principles in the end, would compromise, starting to, do something, that are obvious, that is obviously against the very, perhaps the will of the people. So
I think let's look at the videos. You're seeing live pictures from San Juan. Rambo, who was just here with us, just ran there, and it looks like Zamora. This is the race, one of the race that we're looking at that could be an interesting development. And it stopped. Let's go back and let's look. I'm going to refresh again to check election results. It is 9:38, so that's 3 hours and almost 40 minutes after the polls have closed. We're seeing the election results still at a standstill. With the same first batch. Let's go to our live blog, and you can see again same numbers. This is it's a very small number of precincts, and you're seeing Lucy Torres Gomez in the lead in Leyte. Incumbent Leyte 4th District Representative Lucy Marie Torres Gomez leads the congressional race. Partial unofficial results from Manila at 9:25. Again, the transparency server hasn't received new data since the very first group, and you're seeing Isko Moreno at 329,000 leading over Erap Estrada. We're seeing live pictures. This is, tell me, this is San Juan? This is San Juan. Let's listen in.
City received a request from Attorney Maria Dona Gia C. Lerona Camitan for candidates Ronnie and Francis Zamora on May 13, 2019 at 9:25 p.m. Her request reads, addressed to Attorney Jose M. Tolentino Jr., Executive Director of the Project Management Office, Commission on Elections, through the City Board of Canvassers, writing to formally move/request that the threshold for the proclamation of winning candidates in
Oh, Lord. Did we just miss it?
particularly for the member of House of Representatives and City Mayor be lowered. The transmitted results have reached 90% and the presumptive lead will no longer be affected by the transmitted election results in 4 clustered precincts.
We're coming in and out. Go with me to the results as we have it right now. In San Juan City, for mayor, you have Francisco Javier Zamora. This is come in the first group, and you have 62.76% of the votes. Again, very small numbers over Janela Ejercito. Let's go back and let's hear the video if we can listen in, because the signal is in and out. But
Pursuant to COMELEC Resolution number 10485 promulgated on January 20 procedures. Upon motion by a party in interest to lower the threshold and with the concurrence of the majority of the Board of Canvassers, the latter may seek the approval of the Commission through the PMO Director.
so he's saying,
In
it's,
no case shall the
okay.
result be lower
All right, we're staying with this.
than 90% of all the results. The members of the Board of Canvassers should be required to accomplish a form in duplicate. For such purpose, a form containing the following should be provided. Number 1, the position involved. Number 2, the margin between the top 2 candidates in a single slot office or the lead of the last candidate assured of a seat from the
Okay, what you're watching is our very fragmented live pictures from San Juan City.
next candidate in a multi-slot office based on the received results.
We're expecting a
Number 3,
declaration.
precincts whose results are lacking and total number of registered voters in these precincts. One copy of the above described
Okay,
form should
you're
be
hearing
submitted
to,
the Commission
you're
or
listening
the PMO
and
Director,
hearing
who may approve the lowering
a
of the
possible
threshold,
proclamation
while
of
the
a
other
winner
copy be
in
formed
San
by the
Juan
members of the
City.
Board of Canvassers.
Let's listen in.
The results as of 9:32 p.m. are as follows. For the member House of Representatives, may we request the CCS operator to flash the results for the
Shucks.
candidates of member of House of Representatives. Manzano Edu, PNP, 22,858, 22858. Zamora Ronnie, PDP Laban, 34,000.
This is a hotly contested issue. A hotly contested issue. Edu Manzano was just this week of Representatives. The proclamation is for Zamora. And just this week, right, we had interviewed Edu Manzano.
Is awaiting 3 more results, transmission results from 3 clustered precincts. One from Barangay Batis, one from Pedro Cruz, and one from West Grame. So we only need 3 more transmissions to complete 100%.
Wow.
The total number of registered voters from these 3 precincts we are waiting for amounts to 2,573. Comparing the total lead of candidate Zamora Ronnie from his opponent, the total lead of Zamora Ronnie is 11,473.
Wow. Okay, so we've had a proclamation, Ronaldo Zamora versus Edu Manzano. Ronaldo Zamora has gone through.
Well, that of the candidate for mayor.
And we're going to the candidate for mayor.
As of 9:33 p.m. Votes received by candidate Ejercito Estrada Ginela of PNP is 23,998. I'm sorry. 23,998. Well, that of candidate Zamora Francis, PDP Laban. 34,000.
And the proclamation, a win for Francis Javier Zamora for mayor of San Juan City, winning over Janela Ejercito. Wow, very, very interesting. The Zamoras, Ronaldo Zamora winning over, being proclaimed over Edu Manzano, who was disqualified earlier this week. And then for city mayor, for San Juan City Mayor Francisco Zamora over Janela Ejercito.
Rounds.
Fascinating.
And
Ronaldo
Total
Zamora,
number of
congressman,
percentage that we
and
have,
Francis Zamora,
so based on the following
is for
rounds,
mayor.
the board
His son.
concurs with the motion of Attorney Donald.
Your reaction to this? This is an interesting.
Well, at first I thought
Maria Donna
the
Lerona
position
Comitan.
was hotly contested between Janela and Francis. But as it turns out, I'm quite surprised that it was, the win was so big and the
Yes.
lead. And for the congressional seat, honestly, I'm not also expecting that Ronaldo Zamora, would win this election because number one, you have this new candidate, and Ronaldo Zamora is a veteran.
Yes.
And again, this is a big win for the Zamora family.
Yeah. Father and son, right?
Yes, yes.
What does this show?
Well, I would like to see also the result in Manila because to me, perhaps the voters are starting to, to see that, the Estrada magic is not that working anymore. Janela is a Ejercito. So people, I think, realize that, having, Francis as their mayor would be better for them. And Janela is so young. Perhaps in the next elections, we might expect that she will, challenge Francis again. But if the results in Manila would still be the same, with Isko Moreno leading the polls, I think that would be it. Especially if in the Senate, if the two brothers won't
Fighting
win.
each other. Yeah.
So that would be it for the Estrada family.
Interesting. Let's go to the live blog. You have live pictures here of the declaration in San Juan City. Um, it's mirrored here just a little while earlier, a little earlier than that, at 9:44. The Zamora supporters believed that they had already won and were celebrating. Take a look at the photos. Hundreds. Francis Zamora, his father, wins also as congressman. And again, in Leyte, Lucy Torres Gomez. In Manila, Isko Moreno versus Estrada. Again, though, super. We're waiting for numbers from there. Here, claims, and this was as of 9:25, about 20-30 minutes ago. VCMs from Barangay Estaca are being dismantled. But the CCS reflects that 100% of votes have already been transmitted. This is extremely, what's alarming to me is that the transparency server that should be actually pushing the results to the parties, to the observers, and to the media groups has not moved. Let's keep going. The partial unofficial results. And in terms of Davao, the Duterte children who are set up to sweep the local elections. Let's go, Patricia Evangelista, who's been covering Erap Estrada versus Isko Moreno. Patricia, what do you have? What's happening there?
Hello, Maria. This is possibly one of the more colorful races today. At the moment, we have up to 91.84% of precincts who have already sent in the results for the race in Manila. Isko Moreno, or Isko Moreno Domagoso of Ascenso Manileño, has 329,413 votes over Joseph Estrada, or Erap Estrada Ejercito of PMP, who has 192,763 votes as of 9:30. That means that Isko Moreno has a lead of more than 130,000 already, with 91% of the votes. Alfredo Lim, who was also a former mayor and is running under the PDP Laban Party, has 127,237 votes, which is more than 50,000 less than Joseph Estrada.
Interesting. We kind of knew coming in. Isko Moreno, in his meeting de avance, actually said that he was using the line from the Pope that a new Pope has been in.
Oh yes, he said white smoke would come out of City Hall. He does have a way of words, and it's been a pretty vibrant election today. And both former actors had their own share of fans and time under the spotlight. Although this morning, both were pretty hopeful because, as we know from the last few days, even if Mr. Moreno has been showing in the surveys that he likely may trump former President Joseph Estrada, former President Estrada has been showing his own surveys. So it was a little difficult to tell, but at this point, it looks like a major lead here for Isko Moreno.
Patricia, you're giving us a little bit of the mood, but tell us more. This is huge. What's it like? What are the candidates saying, or the winner?
Well, it's interesting. Understand that it's a very complicated political situation between former Mayor Lim, former Vice Mayor Isko Moreno, and current Mayor Joseph Estrada, because Isko Moreno in 2013 threw his lot with President Estrada against his former mayor, Alfredo Lim. At that time, Isko said that if anyone was going to vote for him as vice mayor of Manila but was not willing to vote for Joseph Estrada, then not to vote for him at all, because he didn't want to suffer the purgatory of having to be a vice mayor under Mayor Lim. So this morning, after he voted, I asked him about his 2013 statements and his full support for current Mayor Joseph Estrada. And his answer was that, well, that was 2013, and this is 2019.
Mentor versus protege. Have you gotten a chance to speak with Estrada?
President Estrada, we were there when President Estrada voted early this morning, and he was asked questions about the political dynasty that the Estradas may be attempting here in Manila as well as in San Juan. He completely denied it, said there was no intention to set up a dynasty, and said if it's the will of God, then it's the will of God.
It's the will of God. Patricia, hold on one second. Arjun, your reaction. We're seeing things moving on the political front.
I think, again, the Manileños, just like the people of San Juan, they want change also in their, city government. And for the past, 2 terms of the former president, I think the Manileños starting to realize that a young mayor would be, good for them. And in fairness to, Isko Moreno, when he was, the vice president, he was really supportive of the projects, initiatives of the sitting mayor. And when he ran in 2016 for senator, I was expecting actually that he would lose that support eventually. But lo and behold, I think that the main factor there was that, Isko Moreno really targeted the young. In fact, I saw his ads.
Yeah.
It was so hip and it was so catchy. It highlighted change.
Yeah.
And to me, that was so effective for this election.
Patricia, two
Yeah.
actors is a generational change and, unseating a former president, but his mentor as well. How do you capture this? What does this show about Manila today?
Well, it is interesting because it's essentially a generational race. You have two Goliaths, as Isko Moreno described the people he was going up against. He said he was going up against Goliaths with decades of public service behind them, who were working in public office or were in the public eye long before he was born, because Mr. Moreno is only 44. And if you look across their supporters, they're young, they're vibrant, but certainly it's not just a single generation, because you have entire families voting for Isko Moreno the same way as their whole families voting for Joseph Estrada. So I wouldn't be so quick to draw a line in terms of whether the young are voting or the old are voting at this point, but certainly he seems to touch a spark. And what's interesting about Mr. Moreno is that he seems to take rather unpopular stance, at least in terms of the national politics now. As we're aware, Tondo and Manila has some of the highest human. We've investigated a lot of possible human rights violations in Manila. Particularly this in Manila has is the highest in terms of deaths under investigation in the last 3 years. Mr. Moreno went on the record and said that he would make sure that in Manila, under his watch, he would make sure that the law was implemented and the drug war was implemented according to the bounds of the law, because he felt that no person should die from extrajudicial killings or murders or the like. He was very clear that he wanted to protect the citizens of Manila, and perhaps that may have also touched a spark with the people here.
Do you think the surveys actually have shown that while Filipinos do care about not having that many people killed, they still supported the drug war and supported President Duterte? Do you think that this shows a shift in that, Patricia?
I cannot say at the moment. We can't really make that sort of claim. Certainly the families of those who were killed who were disappeared or whose neighbors or friends were lost have changed their minds in terms of how they stand in the drug war. Certainly the vigilantes who have interviewed, the families who used to support the drug war have changed their minds, but it's not fair to say Manila has. And Mr. Moreno also enjoys a pleasant relationship with the president.
Two political clans. I mean, there's still clans, right? So while this is change moving forward, yes, but not that much.
Yes.
And what do we expect? The fact that Isko Moreno would say that the drug war will move forward without human rights violations. Well, I paraphrase. But, the fact that that's the case, is this a signal? What do we expect?
I can't answer that at the moment. I do not, because it's not as if the government is unwilling to say that they want to follow the rule of law. So he's not going beyond what the Duterte administration also is willing to say across the board, meaning we want to follow the rule of law, we do not want murders, we do not want people killed in an extrajudicial fashion or assassinated in the streets. So whether or not the actual implementation on the ground of human rights will happen is something we'll have to wait for.
Last question for Patricia is, the campaigns. How did they run their campaigns? Was there any significant difference? I mean, in a local campaign, you have a former president, losing in a local campaign. What did you see different while the campaigns were running?
What I can say from just looking at the meeting, the advances and the proclamations, is that what Mr. Moreno has as an advantage is that he is an extremely articulate speaker. He's charming, he's charismatic, and he's able to talk to Manileños as a Manileño himself, because as he describes himself, he's Batang Tondo. He was brought up in Tondo. He was a former garbage collector. He told the story of pulling himself up by the bootstraps, which is the narrative that President Duterte says also, but as an actor. So it all boils down to whatever story that people are willing to believe. And yes, there's a lot of social media storytelling right now across all the campaigns, but it seems like Mr. Moreno did a lot of personal connections with people, or had a lot of personal connections with people. What I can see, though, is that for this particular election, there's not a lot of movement online for former Mayor Alfredo Lim. He doesn't seem to have much of a social media footprint.
It's so funny. On Twitter right now, I was just going through, white smoke indeed. Patricia, last description of the moment now when a former president is dethroned by his former protege.
Well, I can't go that far yet, but what I can tell you is that Mr. Moreno is not here right now. His people tell me that he will only appear if 100% polling precincts come in with a result. So there's not going to be any claim of an early result here in Manila.
Interesting.
We'll wait for the 100%.
So how many? What's the percentage right now?
As of 9:30 before this call, it was 91.5%.
91.5. Do you expect a proclamation anytime soon?
It is possible.
All right, let us know. Call in, and we'll come back to you. Thanks, Patricia. Patricia Evangelista in Manila. Wow, very, very interesting. And talk about drama of, former president.
Yes.
About to lose a local post. The difference between a national post, right? A man like Estrada winning the presidency and then moving back to become town mayor and now losing it. What's the difference when you run a campaign for the presidency and for mayor? How do you run it?
When he ran as mayor of Manila, I think the image of former President Estrada changed. And to me, that was the time that people started to see him as a different person.
Right.
In fact, he did not run for mayor in San Juan. He ran for mayor in Manila. So this is a different territory, different constituents. And when the people started to feel the service and the kind of leadership of the former president, of course they also saw that novelty, that new thing in Joseph Estrada. Now, as as years passed by, of course, people again they also noticed that some things have never changed. You still have the tendency of the former president to get his people in the government, the city hall. There were stories of corruptions.
Right.
So to me that triggered perhaps the clamor for the Manileños to change the leadership in Manila. And Isko Moreno to me was very much effective in this effort to target these people.
Sophia, I'll go back to you later because you were in Manila
Yeah.
earlier today. But right now on the line, we have Rambo Talabang. He is in San Juan City, where we see another clan versus clan, and the Zamoras running away with father and son with both the congressional, this one is proclaimed, with both the congressional seat as well as the mayor. Rambo, what's it like over there?
Okay, hi Maria. We're here at the San Juan Gymnasium. We're seeing a sea of red here, supporters of the PDP Laban San Juan. Under this party is Ronaldo Zamora, who is running for mayor, and he now has an insurmountable lead against his enemy and nemesis for this post, Zanella Ejercito Estrada. Ejercito Estrada is the scion of the Ejercito Estrada clan, which had its grip on San Juan City for 50 years now, starting with her grandfather, Joseph Estrada, then being passed down to her father, Chico Estrada, and also to her uncle, J.B. Ejercito, and to the matriarch of the Estrada family, Gia Gomez. Francis Zamora ran his campaign with the promise of a new San Juan. Now, Zamora also ran this promise in 2016, but he lost. This time, he was banking on his experience, and that Janela, he said, was inexperienced for the position. We're just waiting for the Board of Canvassers to have the threshold for declaring the winners approved. But right now, Zamora is already here at the center of the sea of red that I mentioned earlier, celebrating with his supporters, taking pictures, taking selfies, and also taking live videos. Maria?
Was this a surprise?
To some extent, it was actually a surprise because Zamora lost in 2016 with the same machinery ran by the Ejercito Estrada clan. But what we're seeing now too is that Zamora may have learned from 2016. It's actually a big part of his meeting, the Abadi speech back in Saturday. He said that he won't make the same mistakes in 2016 and that he will win this time in 2019. Maria?
Fantastic. Rambo, please let us know if anything moves. But with that proclamation, that's our first one on Rappler. Thank you, Rambo Talabong. He is in San Juan City. Sophia, you are going to have to go because you've got another early pullout tomorrow, right? Tell us again, in terms of Manila, was that a surprise for you?
Actually, it wasn't entirely a big shocker. If we go back again to what the voters were saying, right? Because this is who we've been the entire day. They were, as I mentioned before, they were a little bit secretive with who they were going to vote for. But a lot of them said that word again, change, right? And as we see here, that's basically what is happening right now, right? He's ushering this new, Isko Moreno's ushering in this new era with the whole, white smoke is blowing from the city hall. And at least for areas that we've been to, like Tondo, voters there were, they came out and they participated to the very last minute, and so this is what they want, and it's here.
And you want to talk about the drug war?
we tried to ask some voters about that and what they wanted, but then they kind of just shied a little bit away from the topic. Although they were saying, without really touching the issue on the head, they were saying, we just want, at the end of this, we just want, to have a quiet life, peace and order, and I mean, as somebody who is listening to these people, I'm not quite sure that they know exactly. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if it comes in a certain form, then it's there for them. And so, while they were not talking about it explicitly, the desire for peace and everything, because we know that a lot of these barangays in Tondo have been the most touched in the drug war. So with that, they wanted to have that change, as we all mentioned. Mhm.
It's interesting to see, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, it's both in Manila, in Tondo. Let's see. Thank you, Sophia Tomacruz. You've been up for a very long time, as have we all. Thank you for joining us, and good luck on coverage tomorrow. Arjun,
Yes.
we're still looking at all of the what exactly these elections will mean. I mean, very interesting, these two local races that show clan versus clan. It's still clan versus clan, right? What to you signifies change?
For this election, I'm interested in looking at the changes when it comes to the loyalties, the alignments of groups, and with this change in the leadership in San Juan in Manila, perhaps that will signal also the possible change that we are anticipating for the coming 2022 presidential elections.
Right.
Remember, the Zamoras, they teamed with the PDP Laban, and we are expecting that Hugpong ng Pagbabago would try its best to also field in more candidates from the local positions to join them perhaps in the 2022 election. So with this, infighting within the Duterte coalition, I am seeing already, this glimpse of, change in this, Duterte bloc between, groups, smaller blocks composing these blocks. For example, again, the Hugpong ng Pagbabago, PDP Laban, the Estrada bloc.
Right.
So let's see.
Interesting. Let's go to the live blog, our live updates. The first thing that you'll see is Rambo's photo of father and son in San Juan City. Let's go to the computer. Wow, right? Interesting. Father and son tandem, Francis and Ronaldo Zamora, are, well, not only are they insurmountable leads, they've been proclaimed winners. Francis Zamora, the new mayor, Ronaldo Zamora, now the House of Representatives, a member of Congress. Their supporters celebrating a little bit earlier than that. We're still waiting to hear for word of this in Manila. Now it's at 91%, according to Patricia Evangelista. Isko Moreno leading. That's incredible also to see, dramatic. And in Davao, the Duterte children set to sweep local elections. That doesn't seem like too much of a surprise, right? Partial and unofficial results from the Comelec. Ocho Derecho, in the meantime, they're somber but hopeful. We wait to see what the results show as initial votes come in. Earlier tonight, the accidental firing at the PICC, the Philippine International Convention Center, and the press conference that's there. You can go to our live blog and you'll see that. In the meantime, we'll continue pushing to get the results coming in. Let's try one more time to see if we can get Gemma Mendoza on the phone. Can we check and see if we can get Gemma? And if we can get her, she's our head of research. She's at the Pope Pius, the transparency server, has run into a snag. What we're seeing right now is that, well, an application that generates these results files seem to have stopped, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to do this. It seems like they need some action from Comelec on bank. The transparency server is where all of the media, the election observers, and the political parties are getting results. So at this point, only the Commission on Elections main server has gotten the results, or you go directly to the individual races to see these individual proclamations. But we're being told that a lot of results have already been transmitted. It's going to be interesting. So we finished a 12-hour day of voting, nearly 62 million registered voters. It's going to be interesting to see what our voter turnout is. Again, it's our 4th automated election, but the very first time that we actually have not received results. I mean,
This time,
it's incredible, right? That's happened. And yet it's moving forward. This leaves it open and vulnerable, as you said, right?
Yeah.
What has exactly happened? I keep asking questions, and I know we can't ask each other. Your last thoughts in terms of, hold on. I think we can go to the server room. Let's try to see. Yes? Do we have Gemma? We don't. Okay, we don't. So I'm so sorry. I think they're all still trying to work out how to get you the results. But in the meantime, stay tuned. Stay on Rappler. Keep trying ph.rappler.com. We are putting the individual results in the live blog page. You can see it right here. It's right at the top of www.rappler.com. Arjun.
Thank you for having me here.
No. Thanks for coming. I guess what should we be looking at in the next few days? You have an optimistic idea, and that's really good. That's good to move forward to. I had at one point thought that this is existential. That if we lose an independent Senate, we lose. That's not necessarily true, is it?
Yeah, because I'm expecting that these senators, the winning senators as well as the incumbent senators, will try to again explore some points for realignment. Especially for the upcoming 2022 elections. So I'm really hoping that some of these independents, in fact some of the independents incumbent senators are starting to reveal their dispositions, political dispositions, especially for the upcoming 2022 elections. For example, Senator Tito Soto. So.
Right.
So he's not really that, blind follower of the president. So,
but we definitely have suffered tremendous blows to both our institutions, to law enforcement, to press freedom, right?
Yeah.
Are you optimistic despite that?
We have to be optimistic because
Spoken like a Filipino?
Because I'm really hoping that for the 2022 elections, we can challenge this political bloc sitting in our government. I just hope that the opposition groups will try again to unite, to coordinate, to coalesce perhaps. I really hope that they will start talking again in the coming days about what to do.
I was, when we were talking earlier, I wish we had leaders, not politicians, right? What if we do have charter change? I mean, does this pose a threat? Do you think this is something that could change fundamentally our system of governance?
Well, I'm a bit optimistic that if ever we have this charter change, the people will really change some of the long-standing anomalies, problems in our governments. But I'm a bit pessimistic and cynical when it comes to the attempt of the current government to change our constitution. So I'm expecting that with this electoral outcome, they will really try their best to change the constitution.
Correct.
But I'm also hopeful that the opposition, other politicians, independent politicians, will do the right thing.
Right.
In opposing this move, or perhaps offering an alternative to this move.
I want to end on an optimistic note. So we will. Thank you, Arjun Aguirre
You're welcome.
from Ateneo.
Yes.
He's also run campaigns, successful campaigns,
Yes.
for your insights. For the Rappler team, we've been going around the clock. It's been 12 hours of voting, and we're waiting for the final results to come in. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, we will never go off air, really. Just go on www.rappler.com. The first thing you will see is the link to the updates. They're coming to you as soon as we get them. We'll also continue working to get you the results coming from the transparency server at Pope Pius, ph.rappler.com. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you so much for joining us.